Alex, so welcome back to another video. Today I am bringing you my July wrap up. In the month of July, I read so many books and so many pages because it's summer and it's rock girl summer. I'm not doing anything but reading, so I have quite a lot of books to talk to you about today. In regards to my July TBR, I was rather faithful to it. The only one that I didn't get to is The Song of Achilles. At this point, this book is haunting me because I keep feeling like I should read it because I love Cersei, and for some reason that just completely shuts down my brain and I'm like, no, I don't want to read it. Why would I want to read the book that is by an author I love? Why would I do that? So that's something that I'm dealing with at the moment. So I'm not reading The Song of Achilles, and I'll just wait until I have the overwhelming urge to read it. Getting into some of the digital books that I've read this month, I have read 4 digital books this month, 3 of which were actually sent to me by the authors as either ARCs or review copies, and I am super excited about them. This has been such a good reading month in general anyway. I'm really excited to talk about these. The first one that I received was The Wrong Stop by Rexburg. This is a alien sci-fi comedy. In it, we are following 3 friends who have decided to go travel around Europe, and while they are out gallivanting, getting some drinks and stuff on the train, they happen to meet this very strange dude who turns out to not be exactly what he seems. And it's a really fun romp. It's a very British style of humor. It's along the Simon Pegg, Nick Frost vibes of humor and tone as well. It's very campy, it's a lot of fun, and overall it's just one that I think if you just want a really good time with your sci-fi. I know a lot of sci-fi tends to be quite dense, quite heavy, a lot of world building, etc. This is not that. This is, if you really like sci-fi but you want a fun time with it, I would really recommend this one. I gave it 4 stars, really solid reads. I really like reading Rexburg's books as fantastic palette cleansers within the genre, and then on top of that, just that really distinctive tone that I've not really seen in books before, that really quintessentially British early 2000s movie vibe, which I appreciated, and I would recommend if any of that sounds fun to you. The next one that I was sent was The Witch Wife by Lumen Reese. Very different tone here, but this one is about a woman who is taken in chains from a battlefield. Her husband is dead, her sister is dead, all she wants to do is join them, and therefore when she is in fact brought before the king, who wants her to wed his nephew so that she is part of the royal family for her powers, she has to try and escape the clutches of this royal family. This is told kind of in multiple timelines. It is very complex in nature. It has modern vibes at times, but it also has the War of Independence vibes as well. And we have like these monsters that are in the new world that humans should be fighting together against, but instead they're all too busy fighting each other for power. The connections between the characters were really interesting. The interpersonal relationships were very interesting, and everyone's motivations are also a little bit murky at times, and I really appreciated it. I liked the way that we talked about elitism. I really loved the rawness that came with the writing as well. So for example, when you have this woman who has been brought in chains to the royal family, it's kind of gross, you know. She's not been bathing the entire time that she's been transported, you know. She refuses self-care because of depression. All of these aspects that I think a lot of time get glossed over, especially when we're talking about women. You know, at the end of the day, razor ads still shave bald legs when it comes to women. So us talking about women being a little bit gross as well if they don't do self-care, and that's human, was pretty cool to see on page. I really love the world building. I think that the way that we have the ominosity of these creatures, there's this looming threat, the frustration that comes with people fighting amongst themselves when they have this very obvious force they should be reckoning with instead, seems so poignant, you know, in the same way that you have wars going on over territories in our world while we are still, you know, killing our planet. It's that kind of, when you are nothing but a foot soldier, it's the futility of your actions. It's the, you know, that most of us are sipping through paper straws that dissolve, and then you've got the billionaires that are polluting our oceans. It's the same vibe. It's, you have someone who's trying so hard to keep alive, to keep her people alive, and she's having to contend with privileged people more than the actual issue that is happening. And I really appreciated the way that this story was told, and I'm really looking forward to continuing. This is Lumen Reese's series, the first book in the Crocus series, so I'm really excited for this series to continue, and I want to see what's happening with these characters. The next one that I was sent was also another amazing book, so that was a 5-star read for Witchwife, another 5-star read with my next one, which is Kavithri by Aman Bedi, and this is the antithesis of the Poppy War. And I mean that as a compliment. So you have a character who comes from the lowest caste of society, who really wants to enter into this mage school so that she can find her family. We have a South Asian, I think it's Indian setting, and it is steampunk. And we are following this character who is the kind of character that keeps getting knocked down and won't stay down. And I really loved that. And Kavithri is the same amount of rage, the same amount of push, the same amount of hardness that you get with Rin, but the difference between Rin and Kavithri is that Rin then pushes that anger onto everything around her. She's like a black hole, and don't get me wrong, I understand why. And I can't say I love Rin, but I love reading Rin. But Kavithri is the kind of character who doesn't do that. Kavithri is a very self-contained character. She's not dragging everyone else into her issues. The mentor relationship that we have between Kavithri and this man whose life she saves is also very, very interesting. And overall, I just think that if you liked the Poppy War and you liked the themes and the narrative structure and the hope and then the way that that can get dashed, but the way that it can also pull through, you will really like Kavithri. It's got such a unique setting. It's got such a personal voice for Kavithri, and I feel like I really got to know Kavithri throughout the book, and I am just so glad that I got the opportunity to read this. It was one that was on my radar anyway, but it was I don't buy hardbacks, so it would have been a while. So I'm so glad that I've had the opportunity to read this sooner so that I can tell you guys all about it, because it really was just such a fun and harrowing time at the same time. You know, you have these characters that feel like real people, so you don't have just one emotion permeating the whole novel. I had a really good time with it, and I would highly recommend checking it out, especially for fans of the Poppy War. And the last digital book that I got to is entirely my spouse's fault, and I'm not sure I'm going to forgive him for it, because that would be The Drawing of the Three by Stephen King. So I gave Gunslinger 2 stars, which is the first book in this series, it's the Dark Tower series. I gave Gunslinger 2 stars. According to Core Pile, Drawing of the Three gets 2 stars as well, but it is lower. Like technically, Gunslinger had 2.5. This has a 2 star. The thing is, right, is that I've heard so many people talk about this book where it's like, you know, oh, there's really weird amount of racism in it. And there really is. Like, tonally, that is just weird. But I knew that going in, so I was prepared. So I was like, maybe it won't bother me as much. I mean, it still did. It bothered me just as much as I thought it would. But one of the things that I feel like people don't talk about, this book is basically, now we have the gunslinger, Roland, who is basically trying to get his crew together. And Roland's a dick, so like the fact that people want to join him anyway is questionable. And especially because you as the reader know what his motivations are for this crew of people he's accumulating. So there's that. But I think what people don't talk about with this book is how pointless this book is. Like, it's basically him assembling a crew. And then you get like 3 separate plots that happen for assembling his crew. It's in like 3 parts. So you have Roland, who's in this area that's kind of like in a nowhere world where there's the lobstrosities. Yes, that's literally a word. And it's just these giant ass lobsters that are trying to kill him. And he's got 3 doors. So he goes in through a door so the things don't eat him. And then there's a dude there who is a drug addict. His brother's a drug addict. He works for like a cartel. The cartel want to kill him. His brother's overdosed, and then Roland comes in, helps him, and then dude's like, okay, I'll join your crew. The second door is there's this woman who is a black woman in a wheelchair who suffered multiple injuries when she was a kid, which means that she now has DID. And basically that means that she has an alternate personality who is a raving racist. Then the third one is actually we're following a serial killer instead. Like the third door, I thought it would, because I know who the third person is. I thought we'd be following the third person, but we're not. We're following the serial killer. And all of it, it's like, you literally, like, these could have been a chapter. Like, you did not need, like, because the characters don't get developed beyond what you would get in like a chapter. Stephen King is introducing these like almost character flaws to humanize these characters, and they don't really get used at any point. Like, you're not actually seeing Eddie struggle with his addiction in a way that actually impacts the story. And I'm not saying that representation should solely be for a purpose, but I want to see it represented. I don't want you to just tell me this dude's an addict and let's never talk about it again. Show me how that's impacting this character on this journey. And the same with the DID for this other character. It just seems like it's there for obscenity's sake. And there are so many things that just felt really pointless. So not only do we have this ridiculous amount of racism that is just not necessary and is clearly there for shock value, we just have so many pointless parts to this narrative that are not discovered, that are underused, and then we get these plots that don't mean anything apart from a way for Roland to manipulate these characters into joining him, which could have been a chapter. So this book is so pointless that's why it gets 2 stars. Like, I actively disliked the writing style and I didn't care about Gunslinger. This one was actually more annoying because it's just a useless book. It's completely pointless. So I'm hoping that the next one, which is on my August TBR, is actually the one that means something, that actually means there's a story here at all, instead of it just being like a prelude to something. But we'll see. Yeah, that's where I'm at with the Dark Tower. It's going really well, as you can tell. All right, I'm going to get into the books that I read for read-alongs that I'm either doing by myself or with friends, or that I'm participating in someone else's. The first one that I read is Warbreaker. This is part of me trying to work my way through the Cosmere before the paperback of The Winds of Truth, the newest Sanderson one, comes out next year. The actual book comes out this year, paperbacks next year. I only read paperbacks. We're on Warbreaker, which is, at least at the moment, a standalone. And in it we are following 2 sisters, which are Vivenna and Ciri. And Vivenna, the older sister, has been training her whole life to become the wife to the God King. And then we have Ciri, who is the younger daughter, who is unimportant to her family, which basically grants her a whole host of freedoms because no one really cares. And therefore, it's a huge shock when their father cannot part with his favorite daughter and therefore sends his youngest daughter in her stead to be wedded to this monstrous king who they have been at war with for centuries. And it follows their stories. Now, Vivenna then decides that she needs to go and save Ciri because she believes that Ciri is completely unprepared for her new role as wife to the God King. It's how Ciri adjusts to life at court, how Vivenna tries to retrieve her sister, and how they both work to end an impending war. There are some really fantastic characters in here, actually. I was really surprised by how much I liked the secondary characters. I've not really rated Sanderson's secondary character work, I'm not gonna lie, in any of the things that I've read. I really loved Elantris, but I was really only in it for the protagonists. In this one, most of the characters really did feel like characters. They had a distinct voice, they had a lot of sense of humor, and there was intrigue around each character. Each person felt like they had more to them than just what you were seeing. Also, never thought I would think of Sanderson as a romantasy dude, but the 2 that I have liked of Sanderson's, which are Elantris and Warbreaker, I've been here for the romance. I think I actually liked one of the romances in here is probably my favorite Sanderson romance. And like, I'm as shocked as anyone. At no point did I think I'm gonna go pick up Sanderson because I'm in a romance mood, but he pulled through. It was a good time. So for the most part, I really liked the magic system in this one. I liked the world building because it was a lot more contained, and I think it worked really well. And you have this juxtaposition of societies and the contrast between them, and therefore the kind of warring belief systems and factions. And you also have these like godlike characters who A, can live forever, and B, are supposedly gods of things. And they have like a Gods of Mount Olympus vibe, where it's very much like they don't give a shit, really. And I really liked that element. So I had a really good time with this one, and I am actually now looking forward to reading more Sanderson. The next one that I read for a read-along is a solid 5-star read. I'm loving this series so much, and that is the Of Blood and Bone series by John Gwynne. We read book 2 in July, which is A Time of blood. I have been joining the Brothers Gwyn over on their Discord, where we have been talking about these books, and I have been posting my thoughts for either each chapter or like for groupings of chapters. I've also been posting highlights from the book, and it's been such a good time to like chat to people about these books. And this one at least, right, by the first two, I genuinely do like this more than The Faithful and the Fallen. That is entirely because of the work The Faithful and the Fallen did. So because of the amount of world building that there is, and because of all the callbacks, because this is 100 years later, because of all the callbacks to the original series, it feels so much more immersive. It feels like a place you already know but that has changed, and I really, really liked that element. In this one, we do get a new POV, which basically has a horror element to it. It feels very much like he is inspired by horror, that it's very unsettling, it's very creepy, there's a lot of weirdness going on, and the tonal shift really darkens the series and gets you ready for what's to come. I think that still in this one, my favorite character is still Dram, but I do think that Bleda really did improve, as did Riv. They were kind of typical fantasy hero and heroine vibes in the first one, and I think that was deliberate because in this one it really does like shake things up a little bit, and I really like that. But just, I love Drem, and then I love everyone that's around Drem. I love all of the characters that surround him and all of his interactions, and in this one even more so. Overall, absolutely awesome series so far. This series is basically following 100 years on after The Faithful and Fallen. We have potential threats beginning to arise again, and we also have dissent within certain factions of this world, which are basically tearing apart old alliances, and it was done in a way that subverts a lot of what you would expect from epic fantasy in a really interesting way. So we're following a whole host of characters. We're following Bleda, who is the son of a queen, and he is being held essentially as like hostage in the capital so that his mother doesn't wage war against a neighboring clan to kind of keep the peace. We have a young woman who wants to become a White Wing, which are part of like an elite group of warriors. We have a young man and his father who live in this very desolate place and are just trying to get by. And we have so many things going on throughout this world, and how eventually everything needs to come to a head, and hopefully for the last time. The last one that I read for a read-along is the read-along that I myself am hosting along with my friend Eleanor, and that is The Victory of Eagles, which is book 5 in the Temeraire series by Naomi Novik. This series is the Napoleonic Wars with dragons, in which we have Captain Will Lawrence, who is a captain in the Navy, and when his ship takes over a French vessel, there is a dragon egg aboard the vessel, which is on the brink of hatching. Dragons are indispensable to the war effort, so bonding with this dragon is essential. Will takes the hit and therefore becomes the constant companion to the fighting dragon Temeraire. This one specifically is actually mostly set in Britain. We haven't been in Britain for a fair few books now, but this one's set in Britain, and it is actually genuinely knee-deep into the Napoleonic Wars, and we are seeing a lot of discussions around the autonomy and rights of the dragons, because these dragons are sentient, they do talk, so it's a lot to do with the rights of these dragons and whether or not they actually have a choice in this war effort, especially when this war technically is a human war. And there's a lot of heavy themes in this one that I think were tackled really well, especially discussions around justice and what the justice system looks like versus what actual justice is. And I think it was really well handled, and I am really excited to continue on with this series. Obviously 5 books in, it's really difficult to talk about, but I'm having an amazing time. This one was also 5 stars. It was a really good extra installment in this long 9-book series. The only standalone that I have is Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and I gave this one a very low 3 stars. It probably should have been a 2. I definitely felt like I was on the cusp of DNFing several times, not for any other reason other than apathy. I just didn't care. It wasn't engaging me at all. In this story, we are following a young man who happens to encounter a vampire and gets roped into this long-standing war that is happening. It's kind of like Narcos, but vampires. basically. I wanted so much more from this book. I appreciate it's very short, it was limited in what it could do, but it's such a cool concept to have these like rival vampire clans that represent essentially cartels, but it was just done in a way that I didn't care. I did not like our protagonist. I just found him to be fumbling around. He's one of those, it's almost like he was thrown in so that there was a reason why things needed to be explained to the reader, and it all felt a little bit contrived, and I just didn't have a good time with this one. I do like Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is the 4th book of hers I've read. I've rated them each time increasingly less though, which is a shame. I don't know, I might need to take a break from this author and then only base it on the synopsis instead, because I did pick this one up solely because it is Silvia Moreno Garcia, but I just didn't vibe with it, and that's kind of all I really have to say, sadly. Now getting into the series that I read this month, I actually ended up reading 2 series. The first one is the one that was on my TBR, which is the Drowning Empire trilogy by Andrea Stewart, which consists of Bone Shard Daughter, Bone Shard Emperor, and Bone Shard War. The Drowning Empire is a multi-POV epic fantasy that is somewhat Singapore Pirates inspired, and in it we are following a young woman who is the daughter of the Emperor, who wishes to wield her father's magic as his heir, but he distrusts her, and therefore he does not want her to know his magic, and therefore she must resort to other means as to how she learns this magic to help her people. We are also following the daughter of a governor of one of the islands who is a very corrupt governor, and she has a girlfriend who is from the lower classes who is trying to get this woman to understand what her father is doing to her people. And then we also have the best smuggler in these islands who is searching for someone he cares about, and we are getting it from mostly the 4 POV, so from the 2 women who are on the island with the corrupt governor, the emperor's daughter, and then we are also getting it from the smuggler's perspective. However, we do occasionally get this perspective that you don't really understand in the first book. It's just someone who seems to be a bit confused and stranded on this island in the middle of nowhere, and it's how her and those around her are planning to escape. This first book was one that I was unsure if I wanted to rate it 3 or 4 stars. There were 2 perspectives in here that I really liked. There was one that I disliked and 2 that I had issues with. So it was a bit torn. The 2 perspectives that I liked, I did like the Emperor's daughter. In this one, I did find the kind of intrigue, mystery level. It felt very suffocating and very oppressive and very creepy at times, a bit nerve-wracking. It was done really well. I liked the smuggler. He had like a swashbuckling kind of vibe to his chapters. The 2 girlfriends, I had issues with their dynamic. I did think that their relationship was trying to be pitched to me as like a really solid relationship, but it felt really off and I didn't actually buy into it, and I felt like it was really unbalanced. And if I was friends with either of them, I would definitely be telling them that their relationship is like super unhealthy. So I didn't vibe with that because there's so much emphasis on this relationship that I just didn't buy into, and then on top of that, thought was really unhealthy. That other additional perspective, it felt useless. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't care. Tonally, it was completely different to the rest of the series as well. We do have it where some of the perspectives are in first person and some of them in third person as well. That didn't bother me, but I can see how it would bother other people. I ended up settling on a 3-star rating for this one, and there was enough that I liked that I thought was really good, but there were just a few too many issues which potentially could be put down to it being a debut. The second book, however, is where it came in clutch. I really liked this, and this was like a really high 4-star rating. I think that every character upped their game. The relationship issues that I had with the first 2 really ironed themselves out. The other perspective began to make sense, and it actually got quite violent and quite intense, and you felt anger, but at the same time you could kind of understand, but you kind of couldn't, and it was really good in that sense. And then you had the other 2 POVs that are now overlapping, and their interactions were really cool. All of the stakes amped up, and I really appreciated that. However, with this third and final one, we went back down to 3 stars. There were just too many things. So the perspectives that I liked the most in book 1, we get way less of and then we have kind of a little bit of a character reset trope that I don't like. And then we had the Emperor's daughter from the first one. We had her bull in a china shop, not listening anymore and becoming like a really frustrating character when she'd seemed so sensible in the first two books. And then all of that character work just went out the window for the sake of plot. It felt really exhausting. The other two really did increase with each book. I really did like them more with each book. But by this point, there were so many things that felt a bit contrived. We should not be including a whole new quest plot line in book 3. And it was messy. And I'm so gutted because I really wanted this to be a new favorite series. So much about it sounded so cool. And it just didn't pull through for me. And this last one was not the best. Again, 3 stars. I didn't hate it. There were enough things that I liked that made me finish the series. But I was just disappointed, really, because book 2 had been such a huge step up. Obviously, normally with book 2, you get middle book syndrome, and that didn't happen. It was such a good step up. I was like, oh, we're on an upward trajectory, and we kind of just won. It's a shame. And then the very, very last thing that I had to talk about is the other series that I read. I just chucked this onto my TBR because I was in the mood for more maritime fantasy, and after being slightly disappointed by the Drowning Empire, I wanted more just ocean fantasy to get me through summer. So I decided to read the Tide Child trilogy by R.J. Barker. The first book is The Bone Ships, the second book is The Call of the Bone Ships, and the third book is The Bone Ships Way. In this book, we are following Joran Twinner, who is, at the very start, very briefly, the captain of a black bone ship, which are basically, bone ships are ships that are made out of sea serpentine, dragony, leviathan-y creatures. This ship that he is on is a black ship, which is basically where you kind of get relegated when you're some kind of delinquent. And he's the captain of the ship until at the very beginning, a very renowned captain of the fleet has been deemed a traitor, has been sent to the ship and therefore takes over command. And then in it, we are following as we are trying to prevent a war between the two factions. We have had 2 factions on these islands at war for as long as anyone can remember because they're fighting over the resource of dragons. Now, there haven't been any of these dragon things that they make the ships, but they haven't been seen in a long time, but one's been spotted. And while the turbulence had just begun to settle, now there's going to be a race to go find this dragon again. So the idea is that this crew are going to go try and find it before either faction does, so that they can kind of get rid of it and then the war will not arise again. We are following this whole crew, but mostly Joran and then the new captain, Miz. It's just how this crew go about trying to end this conflict once and for all. They recruit other black ships, other ships in general. Now, this first book takes a lot of work. If you're new to fantasy, don't read this. If you struggle with neologisms, then also don't pick up this book. It's just not going to be the book for you. It does have a glossary, and I genuinely did have to resort to looking at it multiple times, which is unusual for me. It's not one that you can just easily go with the flow. You are instantly just dumped in this world, and no one's going to hold your hand. No one's going to sit down and explain to you what any of the jargon means, what any of these terms and words mean. You just got to go with it, and you'll figure it out as you go. And it did take me a solid like half a book to figure out a lot of the terminology, a lot of what's going on, a lot of who these people are, because you get people, places, ships, and then the roles each character has within a ship. So you have like the shipwife, who is kind of like the captain, and it's also a matriarchal society, but it is very much like women rule. So you have the women ruling the islands, you have the women ruling the ships, and it's very matriarchal. It's unusual for a man to be in charge. There is a lot of disparaging comments in the same way that women would normally get in these kind of narratives, which like, you know, well, I don't want to, you know, have a man running my ship. I don't want to have a man fighting at my side. Oh, you did really well for a man. And I quite liked the way that it was done, because it wasn't done really like brutally. It was just constantly hitting you over the head with it. It was just subtle occasionally. And then eventually you realize that it's a matriarchal society. So I really appreciated that, and it took a while to get used to, but it really was worth it, and solid 4 stars. Book 2 takes all of the kind of conflict and the stakes up to the next level. We have a lot more magic being prevalent. I say a lot more. It's not like a particularly fantastical book aside from the setting, but there is suddenly magic in this one, a lot more obviously magic, and I really liked the way that that was amped up. We also have these bird-like creatures that are the ones that like blow the wind so that they can direct the sails, and we see a lot more of that society in this, like the whole grouping of the golems, which are the birds, and I really liked that element. I really liked the way that we're seeing this protagonist really come into his own as well and become like a really reliable character to read and to enjoy, and that you understand his motivations, and I really appreciated that one. I end up giving that one 4 stars as well. And then for the last book, this is the book at the end of the last book and the beginning of this one, it really made me realize how invested in these characters I was. I had not realized how strongly I felt about them. They were entertaining, they were interesting, they were really good reads, but I did not think that I was as emotionally invested in them as I was. The beginning of this book happens and oh my god. Now this one, these books are quite brutal. In this one, you do get some descriptions that if you are on the squeamish side, just no, don't read these. We see the characters have to go through a change in something, I suppose. They need to go through a change, they need to overcome something, they need to push through something. It changes their outlook on life and the way that they function as a crew, etc. The push towards what they want to accomplish, and so many things like that was happening in here. We see a social shakeup go on, and it was just an incredible conclusion that had me absolutely sobbing. I had 90 pages to go on the last day of reading it, and we went out and then I got home, flew through the 90 pages and then just sobbed. So incredible book, had an amazing time with it, loved this series, got better with each installment for sure, and I would highly recommend to epic fantasy fans if you're wanting something on the piratey maritime vibe, if you want something that's a bit more challenging within the genre, and one that has characters that will just creep up on you because they'll feel like people you know, instead of like forcing you to like a character because they're a good guy or anything. It's just you like them because you know them, not because they've done anything particularly heroic or because they've done anything stand out, just for who they are. I think that character work was really solid and I would highly recommend. And there you have it. Those are all the books that I read. There was a lot of books. There will probably be a similar amount in August because all I'm doing is reading. Let me know if you've read any of these and your thoughts on them. Let me know how your July went and how your reading is going over the summer. And that is all for me for today. So thank you ever so much for watching, and I will hopefully catch you in another one soon. Bye.